Pam Bondi's revelations have sent shockwaves through the legal and political world, exposing a network of power that has been operating in the shadows for far too long. For years, the American people have suspected that certain figures in the judiciary were not just neutral arbiters of justice, but active players in a much larger game. Now, the truth is coming to light, and it's even worse than anyone imagined. When corruption takes root in the system, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow, calculated process where those in power ensure that the rules only apply to some while others operate above the law. The system is supposed to function as a safeguard against tyranny, yet time and time again, we've seen how those in key positions manipulate it to serve their own interests. What Bondi has uncovered isn't just one bad decision or one questionable ruling, it's a pattern. A pattern that reveals a deliberate attempt to shield certain individuals while punishing others who dare to challenge the status quo. This isn't about simple legal misjudgments. This is about decisions that have actively shaped the political landscape, protecting those in power while undermining the rights of everyday citizens. These aren't errors. These are choices. Calculated moves designed to maintain control. And the most alarming part? It's all been happening in plain sight, disguised under the illusion of fairness and justice. Bondi's deep dive into this web of influence has exposed how the legal system is being used as a tool by the establishment. When those in power control the judiciary, they don't need to rig elections or pass draconian laws. They can simply ensure that the right cases are dismissed, the wrong people are prosecuted, and the truth is buried beneath layers of legal jargon. It's not about the law, it's about control. The American people have always had a strong sense of justice. They believe in fairness, in accountability, in the idea that no one is above the law. But what happens when those entrusted with upholding that law are the very ones who are bending it for their own benefit? That's the reality that Bondi has now laid bare. The legal system is being weaponized not to protect the innocent or punish the guilty, but to serve the interests of an elite class that believes it is untouchable. For years, warnings about this kind of corruption have been dismissed as conspiracy theories, but the evidence is now undeniable. The connections, the decisions, the carefully orchestrated outcomes, it all points to a level of influence that goes far beyond just one person. The system has been compromised at the highest levels, and Bondi's investigation is proving just how deep this corruption runs. One of the most telling signs of a rigged system is when justice is applied selectively. Some people face harsh consequences for minor infractions, while others, no matter how egregious their actions, walk away unscathed. This isn't by accident. It's not a flaw in the system. It's the system working exactly as it was designed by those who manipulate. The powerful protect their own, while those who pose a threat to their control are targeted and silenced. It's not just about who gets prosecuted, it's about who doesn't. It's about which cases move forward and which ones disappear without a trace. It's about how legal rulings are conveniently aligned with political agendas. And most importantly, it's about how those making these decisions never seem to face any real consequences. That's why Bondi's revelations are so critical. They aren't just exposing one case of wrongdoing, they're pulling back the curtain on an entire network of influence that has been shaping the course of American justice for years. The truth is, most Americans don't realize how much power is concentrated in the hands of so few. The judiciary is supposed to be independent, a check against the abuse of power. But what happens when that very institution is compromised? When those making decisions are more concerned with protecting their allies than upholding the law? That's the nightmare scenario Bondi has exposed, and it explains so much about the injustices we've seen unfold in recent years. Look at the pattern. High-profile cases that should have led to accountability mysteriously collapse. Investigations that should have exposed corruption suddenly hit dead ends. Meanwhile, individuals who challenge the establishment find themselves entangled in endless legal battles, their reputations destroyed, their resources drained. This is not a coincidence. This is a strategy that has been used over and over again to maintain control. The shocking part isn't just the level of corruption, it's how openly it has been conducted. For years, the American people have watched as certain figures seemed immune to prosecution, as legal decisions defied logic and fairness. Many assumed it was incompetence or bureaucratic red tape, but Bondi's investigation shows otherwise. This was never about inefficiency. It was about intentional, strategic decision-making that ensured the right people were protected while others were sacrificed. And yet, despite all their power, despite all their careful maneuvering, the truth is finally coming out. The American people are waking up. They're seeing the patterns, they're asking questions, and they're no longer willing to accept the idea that justice is only for those who can afford it. Bondi's revelations are just the beginning. The exposure of this corruption isn't just about holding one person accountable. It's about reclaiming the legal system for the people it was meant to serve. Pam Bondi's revelations have exposed a dangerous truth about how power operates behind closed doors. It's not about fairness. It's not about justice. It's about control. And more often than not, that control comes down to one thing: money. Those who hold the purse strings hold the power, and those who hold the power decide the fate of millions. It's a game of influence, one where the rules are rewritten as needed to ensure that the elites always win. The American legal system was built on the foundation that everyone is equal under the law, but time and time again, we see that some people are far more equal than others. How is it that certain figures can commit blatant offenses and face no consequences, while others are punished to the full extent of the law for the smallest infractions? The answer isn't incompetence. It isn't a failure of the system. It's proof that the system is working exactly as designed to protect those who fund it. What Bondi has uncovered is a trail of influence, one that leads straight to the highest levels of power. Decisions that should be based on law and precedent instead seem to align perfectly with the interests of the ruling elite. Cases that should be investigated are conveniently ignored. Legal challenges that threaten the establishment mysteriously disappear. Meanwhile, those who pose no real threat to the system are paraded through show trials as a distraction, giving the illusion that justice is being served. It's all about protecting the machine. The political and corporate elite have spent decades building a system that ensures their interests remain untouched. They have lobbyists, think tanks, and networks of influence working around the clock to shape policies, craft narratives, and, when necessary, make legal problems disappear. When someone threatens that order, whether by exposing corruption, challenging authority, or simply refusing to play by the rules, the full weight of the system comes down on them. Money fuels everything. It determines which politicians rise to power, which corporations receive government contracts, which cases are prioritized in the courts. It even determines who gets to control the media narrative, shaping public perception so that the real corruption remains hidden behind a veil of manufactured outrage and distractions. Those who have the wealth and connections to navigate this system understand exactly how it works, and they use it to their advantage at every turn. For years, the American people have watched in frustration as the rich and powerful seemingly escape accountability time and time again. Scandals erupt, evidence surfaces, and yet nothing happens. Investigations are announced with great fanfare, only to quietly disappear when the public stops paying attention. When charges are actually brought forward, they result in nothing more than a slap on the wrist, if that. Meanwhile, the average citizen, with no political connections or financial resources, faces the full weight of the law for the smallest misstep. The deeper Bondi digs, the more clear it becomes that this isn't just about one person or one case. This is about an entire system designed to ensure that those with money and power never face real consequences. Look at the way major corporations and political insiders operate. They break laws, manipulate regulations, and engage in unethical practices with impunity. Why? Because they know they can. They know that as long as they keep the right people happy, as long as they keep the money flowing, they will be protected. This isn't justice, it's a rigged game. A game where the rules only apply to those without power. A game where decisions are made based not on what is right, but on what is profitable. If a legal decision threatens the interests of the ruling class, it will be stopped. If an investigation risks exposing too much, it will be quietly shut down. If a whistleblower tries to reveal the truth, they will be smeared, discredited, or worse. Bondi's investigation has made it impossible to ignore this reality any longer. The money trail doesn't lie. When you follow it, you see exactly who is pulling the strings and why certain decisions are made. It's not about the law. It's about power, influence, and protecting those at the top. The courts are supposed to be the last line of defense against tyranny, but what happens when that very institution is compromised? When those making legal decisions are more concerned with maintaining their status than upholding justice? This is why certain cases never gain traction, why some people seem untouchable no matter what they do. The elites have created a fortress around themselves, using their wealth and influence to ensure that the system works for them and them alone. They control the flow of money, the flow of information, and, in many cases, the flow of justice itself. And they count on the fact that the average person is too overwhelmed, too distracted, or too disillusioned to fight back. The most dangerous part of this entire scheme is that it isn't always obvious. The corruption doesn't always look like a backroom deal or a blatant act of bribery. Sometimes it's as simple as a well-placed donation, a favor called in at the right moment, a decision delayed until public interest fades. It's subtle, insidious, and incredibly effective, and for years they've gotten away with it. But now, people are paying attention. They're starting to ask the right questions. They're seeing the patterns. They're no longer willing to accept the idea that justice is reserved for the privileged few while the rest are left to fend for themselves. Bondi's work has shined a light on a truth that many have long suspected, but few have been able to prove. Justice, in its current form, is for sale. And those with the deepest pockets are the ones writing the rules. Pam Bondi's revelations have triggered a seismic shift, exposing a system that has operated in the dark for far too long. The moment the truth started coming out, the establishment scrambled to contain the fallout. The same people who have spent years pretending to be the guardians of justice and fairness are now the ones desperately trying to cover their tracks. This isn't just about one case or one bad actor. This is about an entire network of influence being exposed, and the people involved know that the walls are closing in. The first sign of panic is always the same: denial. Those caught in the web of corruption act as if nothing is wrong, as if Bondi's revelations are baseless accusations. But the evidence is clear, and the American people are watching. The usual tactics of deflection and distraction aren't working like they used. 2. The narrative control that once kept the truth buried is starting to slip. Then comes the second phase: damage control. When silence and denial are no longer enough, the establishment shifts to minimizing the situation. They claim that these revelations are being misinterpreted or taken out of context. They roll out legal experts and media allies to muddy the waters, making it seem as though what has been exposed is just a misunderstanding rather than a deliberate abuse of power. But no amount of spin can erase the facts. The truth is out, and no carefully crafted statement can make it disappear. The panic becomes even more evident when the establishment turns on itself. The moment it becomes clear that someone might actually face real consequences, the power players start distancing themselves. Longtime allies suddenly develop selective amnesia. The same people who once defended the system as unshakable pillars of integrity now scramble to shift the blame elsewhere. They start throwing lower-level operatives under the bus, hoping to make a few sacrifices to protect the larger network. But here's the problem. Bondi's revelations go deeper than anyone expected. This isn't just a case of one or two individuals abusing their positions. This is a pattern of behavior that stretches back years, possibly decades. Every time new evidence emerges, it connects more dots, painting a picture of a system that has been operating outside the bounds of accountability for far too long. That's why the reaction has been so chaotic. The establishment isn't just facing one scandal, it's facing an unraveling of the very mechanisms that have allowed it to function without consequences. The usual tools, media narratives, legal loopholes, backroom deals, aren't working the way they used to. People are paying attention, questioning everything, refusing to and the fear is palpable. For the first time, those who have operated with impunity are realizing that they might not be untouchable after all. Investigations are being launched. Public scrutiny is intensifying, and the carefully constructed illusion of integrity is crumbling in real time. The American people aren't buying the excuses anymore. They see the patterns. They understand that this isn't about isolated incidents. It's about a system designed to protect itself at all costs. The most telling sign of all is the sudden change in tone from the very people who once dismissed concerns about corruption. The same voices that ridiculed those who questioned the system are now frantically trying to convince the public that they're committed to transparency. But it's too little, too late. When the truth is finally exposed, no amount of performative outrage can erase the years of complicity. This is why Bondi's revelations are so significant. They aren't just exposing corruption. They're forcing the people involved to react in ways that confirm everything they've been accused of. The cover-ups, the shifting narratives, the sudden attempts to rewrite history, it all points to one undeniable fact. The system is cracking, and those who built it are scrambling to keep it from collapsing entirely. For years, the American people have been told that their concerns about corruption and abuse of power were overblown. They were told to trust the process, to believe that justice would always prevail in the end. But now they can see with their own eyes how the system actually works. They can see the panic in the establishment's reaction, the desperation in the way they're trying to shut this story down. That kind of fear doesn't come from baseless accusations. It comes from the realization that the truth is too big to contain. And this is just the beginning. Once people start asking the right questions, once they start connecting the dots, it becomes impossible to stop the momentum. The establishment knows this. That's why they're in full crisis mode, trying every trick in the book to slow the spread of information. But it's not working. Bondi's revelations have sparked something far bigger than just one investigation. They've ignited a movement of people demanding accountability. The more the establishment tries to cover its tracks, the more obvious its guilt becomes. The denials, the distractions, the sudden willingness to revisit certain cases, it all adds up to one conclusion: they never expected to be held accountable. They assumed that the same tactics that worked in the past would work again. But the American people are awake now. They see through the lies, and no amount of spin can change that reality. The system is cracking. The people who built it are panicking. And for the first time in a long time, real accountability might finally be on the horizon. Pam Bondi's revelations have shattered the illusion that the system is built on fairness and integrity. The exposure of corruption has sent ripples through the highest levels of power, and the response from the establishment proves just how deeply rooted the problem is. The people who once operated with impunity are now desperately trying to avoid accountability, but the American people are watching. No longer content to accept excuses and carefully crafted statements, they are demanding real consequences. For too long, those in power have believed that they could act without fear of repercussions. They have relied on their influence, connections, and control over the legal system to protect themselves. But the exposure of their actions has changed everything. The public is no longer willing to turn a blind eye to the double standards that have allowed corruption to flourish. They see how justice is applied selectively, harshly for those without power, leniently for those who control the system. The fear among the elites is unmistakable. The usual strategies of distraction and deception are no longer working. When corruption is exposed at this level, it becomes impossible to contain. Every attempt to downplay the revelations only further confirms what many have suspected all along, that the system is rigged to protect those at the top. The American people are no longer willing to accept empty promises of reform. They want real consequences, not just investigations that go nowhere, or resignations that serve as little more than symbolic gestures. There is a reason why the establishment is so desperate to regain control of the narrative. They understand that once the public sees the full scope of what has been happening behind closed doors, there will be no way to justify it. The exposure of corruption doesn't just threaten individual careers, it threatens an entire network of influence that has been carefully maintained for decades. That's why the backlash against Bondi's revelations has been so aggressive. Those with the most to lose are doing everything in their power to silence the truth. But the truth cannot Be silenced. The American people have seen too much. They have watched as the rich and powerful have bent the rules to their advantage, escaping accountability time and time again. They have seen how those who challenge the system are met with relentless attacks, while those who abuse their power are protected. This is why Bondi's revelations are so significant. They confirm what many have suspected but have never been able to prove, that the legal system has been weaponized to serve the interests of a select few. The unraveling of this corruption is happening in real time. The establishment is scrambling, trying to figure out how to contain the damage. But the more they try to cover their tracks, the more obvious their guilt becomes. The same people who once dismissed concerns about corruption as conspiracy theories are now the ones frantically trying to explain away the evidence. Their desperation is evident. They never expected to be held accountable. They assumed that the system would always protect them. But something has changed. The American people are no longer willing to accept the idea that justice is only for those who can afford it. They are demanding answers. They are demanding action. And for the first time in a long time, it feels as though accountability might actually be within reach. That is why the establishment is so afraid. They understand that once the people realize the full extent of the corruption, there will be no way to stop the momentum for real change. The cracks in the system are widening. Every new revelation adds to the pressure. Every attempt to suppress the truth only fuels more suspicion. The public is beginning to understand just how deeply rooted this corruption is, and they are no longer willing to accept the excuses that have protected the powerful for so long. The demand for accountability is growing louder, and the establishment has no answer for it. The exposure of this corruption is not just about one case. It is about an entire system that has been designed to benefit the few at the expense of the many. The people who built this system are now watching it crumble, and they are terrified. They know that once the public sees the full picture, there will be no way to justify what has been happening. That is why the response has been so chaotic, so desperate. They are running out of ways to cover their tracks. The American people are not going to let this go. They have seen too much. They understand that if real consequences do not follow these revelations, then the system is beyond repair. And that is a reality the establishment cannot afford to face. They are trying everything to distract, to downplay, to shift the blame. But none of it is working. The demand for accountability is only getting stronger. The unraveling has begun. The truth is out, and no amount of spin can put it back in the shadows. Pam Bondi's revelations have done more than just expose corruption. They have ignited a movement. The American people are no longer willing to accept a system where power is used as a shield against accountability. They have seen how the legal system has been manipulated to protect the elite, and they are demanding change. This is not just about one case or one individual. This is about restoring faith in justice, ensuring that the law applies equally to all, and breaking the cycle of corruption that has plagued the system for far too long. The establishment is panicking because they know what's at stake. They understand that once people see the truth, they will not stop demanding consequences. The usual strategies, silencing whistleblowers, rewriting the narrative, distracting with manufactured scandals, are no longer working. The cracks in the system are too wide, and too many people are watching. No amount of damage control can erase the reality of what has been exposed. This is a defining moment. The decisions made in the coming weeks and months will determine whether justice is truly blind or if it remains a tool for the privileged few. The American people are not asking for much. They simply want accountability. They want to know that those who abuse their power will face consequences, just like any ordinary citizen would. If those in power refuse to act, then they risk confirming the worst fears of the people, that the system is beyond repair. But there is still hope. Corruption thrives in secrecy, and secrecy is no longer an option. The truth has been laid bare, and with it comes an opportunity to demand real change. This is not a time for empty promises or performative outrage. It is a time for action. If the system is to be trusted again, it must prove that no one is above the law. It must show that justice is not for sale and that power does not grant immunity. The establishment will fight to maintain the status quo, but they can only succeed if the people allow them to. This is the moment to apply pressure, to refuse to be distracted, to hold those in power accountable. The choice is simple. Either the system works for the people, or it continues to protect the elite at their expense. The American people are watching. They are demanding justice, and this time, they won't